Hey everyone, it's Halsey Scheider with the Helicopter Podcast. And imagine if there was one place where you could go and consume all of your favorite helicopter podcast content. Well, good news. There is now. Vertical HeliCASTS. In fact, the Helicopter Podcast, my podcast, is so excited to now say that we are proudly brought to you by this new platform called Vertical HeliCASTS. And in today's episode, I sit down with not only the creator of HeliCASTS, Mr. Mike Reyno, the owner of MHM Publishing, but I also sit down with the other two podcasters that are going to be joining this platform. That's John Gray of the Hangar Z Podcast and Mr. Jason Quinn, aka Quinny of the ResQ. And in this episode, we talk about HeliCASTS, what Vertical HeliCASTS is and what it means to you, the listener, and how now you can have a one-stop shop for all your helicopter podcast needs. I am so excited. We've been working on this for a long time, and it is such an honor to finally introduce it to the world. Enjoy.
Hey, welcome to the launch of Vertical HeliCASTS. I'm John Gray. Yeah, with me to discuss Vertical HeliCASTS is Mike Reyno. Mike's the owner of MHM Publishing. You guys have all looked at Vertical Magazine over the years, and we're honored and humbled to work under Mike and thankful for this platform that he's created. We also have Jason Quinn, founder and creator of the ResQ Podcast. What's going on, Quinny?
What's up, man? Thanks for being here. Thanks, Mike.
Great to have you here.
We also have Halsey Schneider, founder and creator of the Helicopter Podcast.
Hey, what's up, guys? And it's just quick correction, Scheider, no N. Everyone likes to do it, but
sorry about that. I actually thought about that when I was reading off your last name. I'm like, I probably should ask.
It's all right. I've been called a lot worse, so we're good. Happy to be here.
I just listened to your podcast this morning where you're talking about the mispronunciation of your name.
It's perfect.
so it's actually fitting.
Yeah, it's a common theme. It's a common theme with my life. So just I'm gonna roll with it. But hey, I figured might as well make a little correction. So what's up, fellas? Glad to be here.
Yeah, happy to have you here. And again, super pumped to discuss Vertical HeliCASTS with you all. And to do that, Mike, can you start by telling us what Vertical HeliCASTS is and how that started?
Sure. So we came up with this idea of how to engage the readers more at a personal level. Through the pandemic, I think a lot of us could say that it changed the way we were receiving information, via websites or if it was through social media. And the big one was podcasts. Podcasts really did take off in this space. And evidence here is with the three of you, with the Hangar Z Podcast, the ResQ, and the Helicopter Podcast, which has all been doing phenomenally well within the helicopter industry. So it's how can we bring the synergies that Vertical offers and bring it together in the world of podcasts. So when we look at what we're offering right now with Vertical, between we have a digital magazine, we have a website, and then we have our social media following, which is nearing, I think we're close to 1 million people. What we were missing with the podcasts. So by bringing in the podcasts, that is checked off one more box. And now we have the ability that we can take someone in via written format, video format, and now listener type format. But the podcast, what they really do is that it just brings it to a different level. The thing I like about the podcast is it makes it more personal, and you can really connect with the listeners or who the readers are with Vertical in a different way than we haven't been able to do before. So that was a big key for us when we looked at going down this avenue. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to partner with those podcasts that we felt were the most representative for the various sectors that we're going to be covering. So the first was actually through the partnering and acquisition of the Hangar Z Podcast, which would cater more towards that Valor side of the house with Vertical. And then, of course, the ResQ with that focus on search and rescue. And then Halsey with the Helicopter Podcast, which that is more a broad approach, but with the civil helicopter side of the industry that we're covering off. So, and when you listen to all three of those, the stories that everyone is telling on those podcasts, I mean, they're really interesting to listen to hear it from their perspective. And it's done in such a way, you can't do that in written format. It's just not possible. So we've really enjoyed them. So I think this is a good way for us to expand, and we're not done. This is the first three, and we'll be looking at other options in the near future.
Yeah, it's been really cool to join you, Mike, and be a part of MHM Publishing. The way you guys are presenting that information, you have, you can read information, you can watch the videos, you have world-class video production taking place. The articles that are being written through Valor and all the other magazines under MHM Publishing are super quality articles that are being published. And then again, like you said, bringing the podcast in to talk about kind of the human element of some of the stories that surround aviation. I talk about, and I podcast quite a bit, how everybody who's is in aviation has overcome a ton of obstacles and adversity to get to where they are and to do what they're doing. So it's really cool to hear those stories, and each person's got some different story of adversity that they've overcome to get to that spot. So from the podcast standpoint, Quinny made an effort this last year to kind of put a group together and synergize a little bit for HAI, and that was really cool. That allowed us, allowed us to kind of work together and collaborate in content and increase the quality of our podcast. And this will continue to do the same thing, but on an elevated platform. So excited to do that. Before I introduce Halsey and Quinny and the podcast they run, Mike, do you have any thoughts on, we talked about content creation and kind of the synergy that exists between the podcasts?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we want to bring to this is that it's the ability to have broader access to content. So the written side can be feeding on the podcast side or vice versa. The big thing here is that we're not here to change how anyone does a podcast. I think what the Helicopter Podcast is doing, the Real ResQ and Hangar Z Podcast have been doing, there's a reason why you have as many followers that everyone has. But what we can look at is how can we make it even better? So I think that's what our goal is to how can we feed each other with content. Some ways I don't like that word when we just say, well, we're just feeding content, and it is, but it's really cool stuff, like some of the stuff that we're putting out there. Because look at the industry that we're in. The helicopter industry is the coolest industry within aviation. You don't see a level of innovation in the industry like you do within helicopters, and by being able to convey this in podcasts. I think this is just awesome. It's long overdue. It's unfortunate that the helicopter side of the world has been slow to come into the world of podcasts. So I think this is going to be good for the industry.
Yeah, 100%. Quinn, any thoughts to follow up on that?
Yeah, one of the things I love about doing the podcast side of things is you get the real emotion behind it, the stories that people bring. Yeah. Like, well, I gotta throw out the Real ResQ. All right, I'm just saying. But the guys that come on, it's real emotions, and they're living through whatever they went through again. And I love that part of it. It's different than reading a book, because when you start reading the book or reading the story, reading the magazine, you're putting in your own emotion to it. This way, you're listening to their emotion, and it's so fun for me for that part of it. So I dig it. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Quinny, you're a perfect example of the emotion that can't be bottled up in an article. You've got the most energy of anybody I've ever met. And unless you talk to Quinny and hear it, you don't know. So, you like you said, you capture that emotion.
It's all real, John. Everything about it is real. I've been called out and be like, no, you're not really like that. Yes, I am. 100% like that all the time.
John, how many times have I said if a Jack Russell was a person, it'd be Quinny?
Just twice the size. It's cool.
Yeah, just twice the size. Yeah.
Halsey, do you have anything to follow up on the content creation side?
Yeah, one of the surprises for me in doing the podcast, and I think the most pleasant surprise, is kind of the educational piece of it. So many of my listeners have reached out, and my podcast has become kind of a platform where people can come and not just listen to cool stories and hear other people's experiences, but they can draw from that and take something away. Whether it's what school should you go to if you're in that beginning stages. Just recently had a gentleman on that had color vision issues and getting a medical and kind of that process. And we ended up, hearing that actually was able to help some people further their medical process that they were going through. So I think to be able to not only connect with awesome people within this industry that we all love so much, but just the side of education in which, we're inspiring other people to kind of do what we're doing, and we're giving them that pathway. And that's what I love about this age of content is everyone has a connection. You're able to connect, whether it's on podcasts or videos or whatnot. And I personally feel that podcast is an intimate way to be able to, really connect with people within this industry and learn from it. So I'm super excited. You guys have created amazing podcasts, and Mike, obviously amazing platform with Vertical. And so I'm just grateful to be a part of this and looking really forward to producing some awesome content on my podcast, but also working with you guys collectively to inspire the next generation of helicopter people.
I think that's one thing that's cool about what we're doing is the stories that are being told through our podcasts are inspiring people on different levels. The institutional memory stuff that we're instituting, talking about safety and trying to prevent accidents and things from occurring that have happened traditionally, inspiring the next generation of aviators. That's big. And, recruitment, retention within public safety is a big deal. So to inspire this next generation of folks to come in behind us is important. So I feel like we're tackling that.
Yeah, 100%
through that.
Yeah.
So
I think it's pretty important when you look at the demographic and in the world of podcasts and that younger generation that are listening to podcasts is that, if you're attracting people that are outside the industry to get an interest in the helicopter industry itself, because I think one of the things right now is that the helicopter industry as a whole is very short of people. And I don't think the industry is doing a good enough job to attract people to the industry, but it's through, avenues like this with podcasts or the magazines and social media channels that you can try to help inspire, younger generation to get interested into the helicopter industry. It was one of the reasons why we went on to TikTok. Initially we went on that, everyone said, well, TikTok's for kids. And I said, yeah. And that's where it starts. So I think for all of us, it started when we were younger. Halsey and Quinny. I mean, how old were you when you started thinking about, I want to be a rescue swimmer, or I want to be a helicopter pilot? It starts when you're a kid. So that's all part and parcel. Is that we all have a role to play in helping to attract people to the industry as well. Besides telling those stories, if it's from a safety perspective or telling those different experiences, because I think one of the things that you find if you take an aviation in the broader scope, like bringing in the fixed wing side of things as well, is that people don't realize how much that the helicopter industry really touches our daily lives. You have no idea, as far as from a power utility perspective, from an offshore oil and gas perspective, from a search and rescue perspective, agricultural perspective. Like, you think of all these different sectors, and a helicopter touched that at one point. So that's what I find is going to be fascinating about this, is that as we continue to tell those stories, all in a different, no pun intended, vertical, as far as what sectors we're covering, I think it's going to be perfect. That we have all these different segments, and they all kind of pull on those interests for those different sectors for people.
And I think too, like, one thing that we've talked a lot about on the podcast is like first generation pilots. I'm a first generation pilot. No one in my family, you got to my dad has to have, 5 Bloody Marys before he's comfortable getting on a plane, so, no one is excited or no one had that passion that I had. And Mike, you're right. I had that passion as just a little guy, but it's daunting. Yeah. And so many people may think that, obtaining flight, whether it's rotor wing or fixed wing, is unachievable, specifically in the civilian world. And so it's really cool to be able to talk to other first gen aviators and hear how they kind of navigated that path. And I think that we're creating that new pathway for others to follow. And, I think it's super awesome to be able to kind of pave that way to get more people, because we need more people, both on the maintenance side, the pilot side. So it's been really neat to see that.
Yeah, for sure. Something I want to touch on is the collaboration between not just the podcast, but also the other media forms. Mike, can you touch on that a little bit, and as far as how the podcast will interact with written media? Yeah,
so I think that was one of the key pieces of this, is that from a podcast, we might be able to develop a story in a written format that will go into the magazine or will go online. Average viewership on Vertical for an issue is about 180,000 views that we get on a magazine. We've reached as high as just over 200,000 views on a magazine. So, to be able to put that in a written format for people to read, again, just expanding that access for people in the industry that, hey, I don't have time to listen to it, or I'm going to read it on a plane or whatever. I mean, we get a lot of that where when I'm flying between wherever, I'm reading your magazine on my iPad or on my phone or whatever it is. So I think bringing it over to the written side and vice versa. I mean, John, we've already experienced that where we went and did a story with SR3 with Riverside County. I think that was a really good example where, you were on the ground. Dan Magna was on the ground and in the air for photos and story. And then that came out in a previous issue of Valor. So that's a good example of how we're able to bring that together. And I just see that as we continue to grow this, there's going to be some things that we didn't realize that we can, play off of each other. And I think that's, we've had some ideas, John, that we talked about doing interviews from the cockpit. I think that's going to be, the next step for what we're going to be able to do. Or sorry, Quinny, I should have said from the cabin for your side, Quinny, not just from the cockpit.
Thanks, buddy.
I need some of what he has.
Off the hoist hook. Mike, this one's for you.
Yeah. So no, and here's where we're also going to see it. John, we saw this at AppsCon when we were in Orlando this summer, where we had the Hangar Z podcast at the Vertical Valor booth, and that was awesome. And you saw, everyone from that law enforcement community coming up, when you saw MD come up and they did the takeover on the podcast. I mean, there's some things there you just don't realize what's going to happen until we get into full motion with this. But the fact that we can also have podcasts at trade shows. And as you know, we do a lot of trade events. We're coming into trade show season now. So we have 4 different helicopter shows by the end of the year. So, and I know the podcast will factor into a couple of these. So again, it's just providing that other avenue, but that they can piggyback off of each other.
I think of myself as a consumer. When I find an article that I'm interested, I think it's cool now with Vertical. If I find an article in SR3, I can read the article, and I can also watch video that Dan Magna took. I can also listen to a podcast about what they're doing. So you have, basically a fully encompassed way of consuming this information. So for me as a consumer to be able to understand those on those different levels is really cool. Yeah. So yeah, love that idea.
I think what Quinny said, he said it best, is that it brings out the emotion. I mean, podcast, you can sense the emotion out of whoever it is that you're having that discussion with. And that's a big thing. You can't do that in written format. So I think that's a big part of this, is to bring out that emotion.
Kind of like to move on now and introduce Quinny and Halsey as far as the podcast they produce, if you're not familiar with them. So I'd like to start with Jason. And Quinny in the cabin.
I'm good with that.
If you could just introduce yourself and just describe your podcast and what you aim to do there.
Yeah, happily. So Jason Quinn, I am prior U.S. Coast Guard rescue swimmer, number 500 specifically. Yes, every one of us are numbered. I think there are just over 1,030, something like that now, but. So pretty proud of the fact that I can say I'm 500. I was sitting around with my buddy one day and we were talking about podcasts, and he said, dude, you would be a good host. And I was like, okay, that's cool. And then my wife, after a year of saying, hey, I got an idea, she's like, do it. So the podcast was born, and it was born with the idea of taking guys' stories from what they've done in the field, their rescues, and bringing it to light, what really happened. So as a matter of fact, let me throw in, because I actually had a guy that was interviewed by Vertical Magazine by the name of Lane Abshire, and he was in the helicopter during a medevac. They took off, and the pilot ended up having a stroke in the helicopter, single pilot, ended up landing the helicopter somehow. I'm not going to tell you all the details. You got to go listen to the podcast. All right. Or go read the article, and I got you. Come on, Mike. I got you.
You got it. You got it.
All right. So that's what it was. I wanted to hear the real story. I wanted to hear the backstory. I wanted to hear from when the SAR alarm goes off and everything in between. So news clippings, awards, articles, they don't give everything. I wanted to hear it all. So Real Rescue was born. It's been fun.
I love it. And you guys just released your 150th episode, right?
Wow.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep. But I'm excited. Woohoo!
Yeah. Congrats, man. That's awesome.
All emotions. Real, dude. Real. It doesn't go away.
Halsey, I'm sorry you got to follow.
Seriously,
up,
come on.
Yeah.
I get you get my last name wrong, and then I got to follow behind Quinny. Like I have no chance. I should just give up. Should I be here?
You know what? If it helps you, you're better looking than I am, so it's cool.
Beauty's in the eye of the beholder, I guess. But yeah, my name is Halsey Scheider, and there's no N. But hey, look, it's a common mistake, so it's cool. I started the podcast kind of in conjunction with my helicopter sales business, Helicopter, that I have, in hopes that I could kind of connect to the people within the industry that I serve in. It just has blossomed into so much more than I could have ever imagined. Specifically, just all the feedback from how individuals have listened to the podcast and they've literally changed what they're doing in their life to go back and pursue helicopter flight school. Such is life, right? You start something thinking it's going to be one way, and then it kind of veers off into this other direction. So I think we're at almost about 50 episodes, coming up on 50th here soon. And, my podcast is really centered around connecting with the individuals within the industry, all different sectors. I also will produce some solo podcasts where I just have something I want to talk about. And so I talk about it. And so it's kind of a mix of interview style, sometimes solo, also looking to do kind of more panel and discussion, like John said earlier, with safety and talking about incidents and accidents. I think it's vital. I think us as a collective podcast group can actually make a difference when it comes to safety. And so I'm really looking forward to collaborating with you guys on that. I don't have as much energy as Quinny. I'll try. Do you take like a B12 shot in the morning or something? Like what's the secret? Like here I am, like I like fall out of bed and I'm struggling, and Quinny's like, he's probably ran a marathon, So just excited to be included with you guys. And it's a real honor. And Mike, I obviously appreciate the opportunity, and I think it's just going to be super fun. I cannot wait to see where we think it's going now and how amazing it truly develops. So super, super fun things to come for sure.
Yeah. What I like about your podcast is the breadth of knowledge you bring on. You like you said, you have somebody from every aspect of or every segment of rotorcraft aviation. So, it's been really cool to peruse through your library of podcasts and listen to the different folks that you've had on.
Thank you.
And like you said, I'm really excited to see how we can all synergize and, collectively elevate the quality of podcasts and the impact we're having on the industry, so HeliCASTS will definitely do that. For those that aren't familiar, if you're listening on Quinny or Halsey's network, I'm John Gray. I'm the host of the Hangar Z Podcast. Just retired from Ontario Police Department in California. I was in public safety for 25 years. Started with, I did things backwards. Usually people, they become a fireman and they stay. I became a fireman and then I left the fire service and went to law enforcement. Something's wrong with me. I don't know what, but I left after 7 years, started with San Diego PD, went to Ontario PD, where I got the opportunity to go to aviation and pursue a dream of becoming a pilot. And that happened. In 2020, just like everyone else, COVID struck, and looking for ways to kind of entertain myself outside of work and being a consumer of podcasts. I listened to a podcast that interviewed LA County Sheriff's pilot flying the Super Puma. I thought it was really interesting. So after I heard that podcast, I'm like, where could I find more of this? I looked and there was nothing. So I remember on a flight with my partner, I'm like, hey, what do you think if I start a podcast? And I thought he'd laugh me out of the helicopter. And he's like, no, I think that'd be really cool. So we did. And it's now 3 years later. We just actually today released our 100th episode. Yeah, we're very excited and again, just honored to be in a position where we can work with you all and contribute to the community that we're a part of. That's the Hangar Z Podcast. We promote the personal equipment behind the missions of public safety aviation.
So I think with HeliCASTS, what we really like about this is the fact that we're sharing this through all the vertical channels that we have, but all the podcasts are still going to be available through all the typical podcast channels where you can reach them now. So we're just going to try and expand that network. But the fact that you can get it through the Vertical Daily News or Valor Weekly, that way every time there's a new podcast comes out, we'll be sending it out that way. It's a free subscription. Anyone can sign up, or you continue to listen to the podcasts on your favorite podcast network.
Yeah, all the platforms are available, and then within the Vertical website space, there will be a spot dedicated for the podcast, and that'll be kind of the landing page. You can go and peruse all the different helicopter-related podcasts that are out there, so you're not having to search through the YouTube or iTunes library to find those different podcasts. So, Mike, thank you for your leadership, your vision to create such a such a cool platform for us all to, not just as podcasters to synergize, but, for the audience that's going to listen to these. I really think it's going to benefit them as we synergize and improve the quality of these podcasts as we go forward. So in closing, anybody have anything like to throw out?
Just excited, and to our listeners.
ResQ. Sorry.
Damn it, Quinn. Come on. How can I compete with this guy? No, I think it's great. And to our listeners, to all the podcasts, we do this because you guys listen, and getting your feedback, getting your likes, getting your follows, that just motivates us to continue wanting to do what we're doing. And so, please continue to share these podcasts with your friends. Help us get our word out, because, I think that there's some really cool things on the horizon. And so, help us build this, because without you guys, the podcast isn't much. So we appreciate everyone that continues or that listens now and will continue to listen, and just keep liking, keep sharing, and come with ideas, how we can improve or other thoughts of guests or things like that. We want to make sure that we're dialed into what our listeners want. So excited and to my fellow podcasters here. You guys are great. Quinny, you're nuts, but in a good way. And Mike, thanks for putting us together.
Halsey, you said something there, Halsey, where it's like, it's sharing, not just sharing the podcast, but ideas, suggestions, content. Any ideas for personalities to cover or different industries. I think that's awesome. That's what can make this can make these platforms 100%. Better.
I'll throw one more thing out there for everybody too. If anybody, if you're looking to come on to a podcast, if you got stories you want to tell, if you've got information you want to drop, let us know. I mean, we're always looking for people to come on to share their stories and share their experiences. So give us a holler. Love to have you.
Yeah, 100%. Well, guys, thanks for joining us, and cheers to the launch of Vertical HeliCASTS.